Congressman Tony Gonzales has dropped out of the race to retain his seat in the House of Representatives for the 23rd Congressional District in Texas. This, of course, follows a major scandal that proved, well, that he's just not a good dude, number one. Number two, that doesn't prove this, but we've known this for a while, that the dude is a total rhino and should never have been a Republican representing any state, let alone Texas. But here he is, and he is out. Now, I'm not completely satisfied. To be clear, I think that he should leave, and I know that would put a lot more strain on the House majority, but so be it. This guy's a scumbag. Okay? For those who don't realize, or maybe you didn't hear, he was involved in at least one affair that he was having, some sort of, I don't know the degree of the affair or how far it went, but I do know that there were interactions, text messages, lewd comments, lewd whatever, and perhaps something more physical with a staffer, somebody who represented him in Uvalde, of all places. Regina Santos Aviles was a 35-year-old woman who she was his office coordinator there, and she died. She committed suicide. She lit herself on fire in her backyard, assuming we can assume that this has something to do with her relationship with Gonzales. But even if it doesn't matter. I mean, he got busted doing what he shouldn't be doing. And this goes far beyond just the Republican Party itself. We should demand this of all human beings, that we don't get engaged in extramarital affairs. Period. You get married, you stay married, you love your wife, you love your husband, and you do that for the rest of your lives. And then, depending upon if one dies, depending upon how old you are, maybe you remarry, maybe you don't. I don't know. I've been married for over 3 decades. I couldn't imagine marrying anybody else. I couldn't imagine being with anyone else. And maybe I'm blessed. I know I'm blessed, but maybe I'm naive when it comes to divorce and affairs and all that stuff. But hey, I don't mind. I don't mind living in in a position lacking understanding of that stuff. It does, call me old fashioned, but it does feel to be disqualifying, even in today's world. I was always very critical. I've been critical of President Trump. I've been critical of many politicians that I generally respect otherwise. But when they are engaged in extramarital affairs, when they have divorce after divorce after divorce, that's not the character that I want in office. And like I said, you can call me old-fashioned if you'd like. You can say that I have too high of expectations in the modern America. But yeah, I do. And I'm okay with that. So, but now we look to Brandon Herrera, who admittedly I don't know a whole lot about. I know I should, but it's funny because I didn't, what's his name? Gonzales didn't really hit my radar nearly as much before. It wasn't until he went off and supported backed gun control initiatives by the Democrats. That's when he hit my radar. I believe that was 2022-ish, if I recall. And that was one of the reasons that President Trump did not endorse him in the 2024 election. He was coming out, and people say, oh, but he was representing Uvalde, and it would have been really weird if he didn't support it. And I disagree. Look, your proximity to a tragedy, your proximity to disaster does not and should not affect how you vote, your representative. And I can guarantee you that in his extraordinarily wide area, I mean, he had one of the biggest congressional districts in the country, that he did not represent the fullness of his district by voting for gun control, period. What he was doing was he was making the PR move, knowing that if he voted against gun control, then the focus would have been on him because Uvalde was in his district. And so he's just trying to avoid whatever. He decided to go down that road. And plus, as it turns out, he is a total rhino anyway. So even with or without Uvalde, I think he might have been inclined to vote for gun control anyway. Who knows? Herrera, on the other hand, is a gun guy. I mean, he's actually known on YouTube. He's an influencer known on YouTube and X and the other social platforms as the AK guy. I already like him. I need to learn more about him because he did run. Apparently he almost beat Gonzales in 2024, but fell just short of that. This time, well, he won. He actually got more votes than Gonzales, but not enough to avoid a runoff. Now Gonzales is backed out. Again, Mike Johnson and Steve Scalise and the rest of Republican leadership called on Gonzales to drop out of the race, but they haven't called on him to step down. And I disagree. Again, I know that it would put a large strain on the GOP majority in the House. I know they've got a razor-thin majority. They can't afford to lose a single vote. But to keep him around, just to hold on to that majority, to make things a little bit easier, it's not a good look for the Republican Party. It's not a good look for Mike Johnson. And who cares? Let's put the good look aside. That's minor. The sheer fact is that a woman is dead. Then we believe that, based upon all the evidence, that it's a direct result of a sitting member of Congress and his sins. That should be disqualifying. That should be, let's figure this out. Let's, I don't know if Governor Abbott could, I don't know the laws in Texas. When somebody leaves office, can Governor Abbott quickly fill the seat with somebody? I don't know. Probably not. I assume that if that were the case, then that's the path that Republicans in the House would go. As a matter of fact, we'll do it live. Let's go ahead and ask, what are the rules for appointing a new member of the House of Representatives when a Texas congressman steps down? ? Let's see if we can just get a quick answer. How are they filled? Here's one from when an incumbent member dies, resigns, or leaves office. Yada yada yada. Multiple specific special elections fill vacancies in the House. Yeah, doesn't look like they could fill it. But again, I don't care. I know that's wrong. I know that wrong from a strategic perspective. It's not very pragmatic of me to say that. But we currently have a member of the House of Representatives who is known to be involved in the death of a woman, the suicide of a woman who was on his staff. And so, to me, suck it up. All right? Suck it up and just do it. Just get him out of there. Have him disappear from public eye. Don't have him for the sake of votes. Don't have him for the sake of anything. He doesn't belong there. He should not be representing the people in his district. But again, that's it's coming from a guy who takes offense to sins committed by members of our supposed leadership, our representatives, the people that are in the seat of power to allegedly do right by us. I don't trust the guy, and I want him out of there.
The best coffee out there is from a Christian company. Go to patriot.tv/coffee and lock in.
All right, so I did a little bit of research. Here's what we need to know about Brandon Herrera. The dude is young. He was born in 1995. And yes, I feel old. He was born in North Carolina to a family with deep Texas roots. Both of his parents are military veterans. He attended Campbell University, where he studied pre-law before dropping out to run his firearms manufacturing business. Sure sounds like the American dream right there. His YouTube channel, started in 2014, focuses on testing and reviewing firearms, including antique and military weapons such as the AK-47 and RPG-7, discussions about gun laws and politics, and a series recreating the assassination of public figures. All that sounds really stinking interesting. going right now. Okay, subscribing. Let's check this out. He built his national reputation producing firearms content on YouTube while running a firearms manufacturing business in Texas, and has become a prominent voice in the gun rights community, frequently testifying against gun control legislation and speaking at pro-Second Amendment rallies. So yes, he seems to be pretty much, at least on the gun side, ideologically opposite of Tony Gonzales. In 2024, Herrera released a rifle and that he and his team engineered called the AK-50, an AK-47 pattern rifle, chambered in 50 caliber. Wow, 50 caliber BMG. That's a Browning machine gun, blending the durability and power of the two separately. The gun was later added to the video game Escape from Tarkov. Yeah, I'm sure it was. I'm sure that I would love to have one. Whew. Herrera describes himself as a strong constitutionalist who believes limiting federal power and returning it to the states is key to individual liberty. Yep, I agree. He works with pro-freedom groups in the Second Amendment community, including the National Association for Gun Rights, the Firearms Policy Coalition, Gun Owners of America, and Young Americans for Liberty. His campaign platform includes national concealed carry reciprocity, strict border security, veteran support, no new taxes. Oh, please, let that happen. Cutting wasteful spending and backing the REINS Act. 2024, let's look at this. Herrera was a candidate in the race to represent Texas's 23rd congressional district. In the primary, he received 25% of the vote, while Gonzales received 45%. As no candidate received 50%, a runoff was held between the two where Herrera lost by 354 votes. Wow. Several political action committees from outside of Texas donated millions of dollars to Gonzales' campaign against Herrera. The pro-Israel lobbying group AIPAC ran an ad campaign accusing Herrera of joking about veteran suicide and having glorified Nazis and mocked the Holocaust on his YouTube videos. AIPAC doesn't like him. I'm chuckling. In his 2026 campaign kickoff, Herrera said, "It started to eat at me. Those things that I didn't like about D.C., about my congressman, they didn't change. As much as it's more comfortable to just look the other way, I can't bow out of a fight if I know I can make a difference. It's just not how I'm wired." In November 2025, Herrera announced his campaign had raised $1.1 million for the primary. That's very significant for a congressional primary, with over 33,000 small donors and contributing along his own PACs. During the March 3rd, 2026 primary, Herrera forced Gonzales into a second runoff, coming in first with 43% to Gonzales' 41%. And then, on February 18th, Herrera called on Gonzales to exit the race and resign over the alleged affair. He does have controversies, though, so pay attention. This is the part where, we need to know everything about him. And to be clear, I have reached out to him. Let's see if he's replied just yet. I have reached out to him in hopes of scheduling an interview. Has not reached back out yet. It's only been a few minutes. We'll give him time. It's after midnight over there. So, let's see. This is where things get complicated for Herrera's general election prospects. Herrera has posted several YouTube videos featuring Nazi imagery and jokes about Nazis and the Holocaust. In a 2020 video, he played Nazi marching songs while covering Nazi guns and subsequently liked numerous comments praising his use of those songs. In a 2022 video, he referred to the MP40 machine gun as the original ghetto blaster, with a montage of him and an associate firing the weapons while goose-stepping to Erica. Another video, that's a song I assume, I don't know. Another video covering historical weapons in the Rhodesian Bush War featured the flag of Rhodesia, a symbol co-opted by white nationalists. He has also been admonished for his jokes about veteran suicide, which drew criticism from Mike Banks, now President Trump's Border Patrol chief, and for mockery of Trump's son, Barron Trump. His co-hosted podcast, Unsubscribed, was described by Houston Chronicle as displaying offensive commentary or repeats racist stereotypes. So what are his general election picture, what does that look like? With Gonzales now out, Herrera heads into the May 26 runoff as the presumptive Republican nominee, but the general election is not a foregone conclusion. Texas political scientist Cal Gilson assessed the situation plainly. She said, both Gonzales and Herrera are damaged goods in a general election. The district leans red, but is not dependably Republican. Democrats could stand a chance if they pour money into the general election. Attorney and educator Katie Padilla Stout secured the Democratic nomination for the 23rd district with 52.3% of the vote in the March primary. Anonymous Republican insiders expressed doubts to the San Antonio Express News as to whether Herrera would be a competent policymaker around issues other than the Second Amendment. You know what? Let's be clear about one thing in that regard. And this is, I don't know. I have not spoken to Brandon Herrera before. But anyone who thinks that Congress is just so complicated that you've got to know all of your issues inside and out in order to be able to vote competently, that's just not the case. Okay? Like Congress and even Senate, but Congress in particular is like it's a job on training wheels. Okay? They stick you with people that basically tell you everything that you need to know, what you need to do. By day 5, a member of Congress knows who to ask about what. Okay? And when it comes to policies aren't complicated. They really aren't. Government tries to make them complicated, but at the end of the day, the tough part is not navigating the policies. The tough part is navigating the system in Congress, and that part is definitely broken. And that part, to be clear, does take years to properly learn how to navigate. By the time you figure out how to navigate, you're probably too corrupt to be able to do anything about it. I've seen that time and time again. But don't tell me that, he might not know enough to be in Congress because he only deals with guns. That's naive. That shows a clear lack of understanding of how our government actually works. Bottom line, Herrera is a genuinely novel political figure, an internet native, grassroots-funded, ideologically uncompromised challenger who came within a whisker of unseating an incumbent twice. He is now also carrying baggage that legacy media and Democrat opposition researchers will exploit aggressively in the general. Whether his online coalition can translate into a general election win in a border district that went 62% to 33% Republican in 2024, but is now an open seat with a weakened nominee, is the central question of the Texas 23rd congressional race. We'll see. Again, I'm trying to reach out to him. I don't go strictly off of, whatever the internet says about pretty much anything, and neither should you. Is this guy a white supremacist? Is he a Nazi? Is he all these other things? We've heard it so many times about so many people. And it seems as if, again, I'm not defending the guy because I haven't seen the clips. I haven't talked to him. But I just want you to know, because people say, well, it said that he was, he was a Nazi and a white supremacist and made jokes. Look, jokes are jokes. And after I get through all this stuff, if it really is truly legitimately just this guy joking, if he doesn't really come across as a full-blown white supremacist, I have no problem supporting him. If he's making jokes about that stuff, I know it's nuanced. There's obviously lines that can be crossed, right? So I'm not going to say, oh yeah, I'm going to totally back this guy. We'll see. Okay, we'll see. I think that he has earned the right to be questioned, for us to look deeper into him. This cursory explanation of who he is definitely not enough for me to embrace or deny him one way or the other. So, and I would suggest that you all take the same basic stance with, well, pretty much everybody. Anthropic plans to sue the federal government, the Pentagon specifically, for ousting them and their AI technology over a dispute. And it was really more of a personal dispute than anything else. To be clear, the dispute between CEO Dario Amodei, I believe that's how it's pronounced, and Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War. President Trump weighed in, called him a radical leftist, him being Amodei, and said that Anthropic as a company, big tech in general, is the essence of it is that they're anti-American and cannot be trusted. And I don't disagree wholeheartedly with that statement because there has been proof over the years that everybody in big tech they seem to be very much left-leaning and willing to subvert patriotic American values for the benefit of the leftists, the globalists, our enemies in general. But with that said, let's be clear about something. The demands by Amadei were not really that awful in practical purposes. He was saying, look, we just want to make sure that our stance, which they had maintained, to be fair, they made their stance is clear from the beginning. When the contract was signed last year, they said, look, we've got two exceptions, right? We don't want our AI used for automated killing machines without human interaction. In other words, you couldn't let the AI itself choose whether or not to fire on an enemy or whoever. And that's reasonable. I would expect that. The second demand, the second limitation to the use of their AI was against mass domestic surveillance. Again, I wholeheartedly agree. And I'll admit, I was sympathetic to their plight because, number one, the Pentagon in the initial contract had agreed to both of those terms, and number two, they're reasonable. We don't want those things to happen. But as I've dug into this a lot more, I finally understand where Pete Hegseth is coming from. So he called on a renegotiation of the contract last month. He said, look, there's no reason why any private company should be able to dictate how the Pentagon, how the U.S. military utilizes their tools. And if you stop and think about that, you might be like, oh, he wants to be able to use this for mass surveillance or for whatever, for automated killing machines. But that's not what he was suggesting at all. What he was saying was he wanted to replace the verbiage of, these are the limitations passed on from Anthropic to the federal government. He wanted to say that the only limitation was that the AI couldn't be used to do anything unlawful, couldn't be used to commit crimes. And that should be the standard. That should be the basis upon which all AI technology and its use within government is adapted. There should be no restrictions that are placed by the private company, even the creators of those AIs. The reason being that when you start placing limitations, you start getting into judgment calls. And those judgment calls can not only muddy the waters legally, but perhaps much more importantly, could become detrimental during the course of a battle even. Okay? Who determines if the AI is being monitored, and we can assume that it is, if the AI is being monitored even by other AI, which is very possible, it could be determined, for example, that a decision to set, I'm picking a random example. I couldn't imagine this being the case, but let's just say, for example, that a turret is set on a particular mode that makes it like a sentry mode, and it is pointed in a particular direction, and it basically says, look, the command is that it's pointed in the direction of the enemy, and if you see anything moving, shoot it. Okay? Well, the AI could interpret that as, well, wait, no, a human has to point out when a shot has to be fired. You can't kill anybody through automation. That's the stance that Anthropic has taken. And to be fair, it's also the stance that OpenAI has taken after they signed and then renegotiated their contract with the Pentagon following the canning of Claude of Anthropic's artificial intelligence. But I'll get to that part here in a second. So in that scenario, it would have been a righteous maneuver. From one perspective, it's like, no, the decision was made that basically anything coming from this direction is going to be the enemy, so we want it shot immediately before it's able to get off a shot and take American lives, for example. But of course, the AI might interpret it differently, and that's where the confusion comes in, and that's where the risk comes in. This is a risk that President Trump and Pete Hegseth do not want, and it's a risk that we should not want either. Now, you might say, but doesn't that give them free rein to commit mass surveillance against U.S. citizens or to automate kill machines? The answer is no, because the restriction that Pete Hegseth wants is one based upon lawful use. In other words, they still can't do those things that would be considered unlawful. The difference here is that instead of letting AI or the AI company decide whether or not it can be used, it falls upon the courts. It falls upon military justice. It falls upon legal standards. If something were to happen, then it can be basically Anthropic would have the opportunity to either sue or to press for criminal charges for their AI being used in a way that is unlawful. That makes it to where decisions made in real time on the battlefield are not affected by whether or not the AI has to decide if something is restricted or not. It follows its orders as it should. And then, if it's deemed after the fact that something is illegal, okay, well, now there can be repercussions. Now there can be adjustments made. And you might say, well, isn't that too late? What if it automatically shoots a school bus or, whatever? Number one, I don't think that that's a legitimate concern, because the scenarios that we're talking about with automated kill or mass surveillance, both those would require direct interaction from humans in the first place. In other words, you might be able to set it to automatically kill, but you'd have to do so in a way that is still human bound. Okay? And you might say, well, it's not like the AI is going to randomly start mass surveilling Americans unless there was a big, huge mistake made or somebody's trying to game the system within the Pentagon itself. In either case, there's still legal methods to bring justice. There's still legal methods to fix that system. The gap there is that Hegseth says, let's do it the legal way, and Anthropic says, we're the arbiters. We are the judges of whether or not the military, the United States military, is allowed to conduct an operation. We must first decide whether or not an order, through utilizing Claude, utilizing artificial intelligence, whether or not that order is allowable, and whether or not we should place restrictions. When there are restrictions at the source, that's a problem. When there are consequences for the results, that's not a problem. That's justice. That's reality. And that does nothing to hamper our warfighters' ability to fight wars. That's the big difference. Now back to OpenAI and ChatGPT and their deal that everybody keeps pointing to. They keep saying, "Oh, this is all political. This is all political because look, the demands that OpenAI or that Anthropic was making. Well, OpenAI was able to get those demands in paper." So number one, Anthropic has bragged, or not Anthropic, OpenAI has bragged about, yeah, we got those restrictions in there, but we haven't seen the language there, and I would be absolutely, utterly shocked. As a matter of fact, I'll put it at about a 99% chance that the verbiage of the quote-unquote restrictions that are in there are just specifically to save face and to reward Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, and OpenAI itself, with the basically saying, look, we're better than this. We're better than Anthropic. We were able to get a sweetheart deal. And don't worry, we didn't sell out to the military-industrial complex, that being fodder for the employees, right? It's like we got the restrictions that Anthropic wanted. But again, I would argue that since we have not seen the verbiage of those restrictions, they will be, again, with a 99% certainty, they will be worded in a way that's favorable to the Pentagon. It'll be something to the effect of the use of ChatGPT by the military for automated attacks, automated kills, as well as for mass surveillance of American citizens, are specifically designated as restricted and punishable through the justice system. In other words, there won't be any restrictions placed on the software itself. The restrictions, or if you want to call them that, the consequences are consequences that would have been there with or without the language. The consequences, I mean, the government can't do that with or without AI. Okay, you can't go around and randomly kill people, right? And you can't go and do mass surveillance of American citizens. Now, obviously, for as long as we can remember, since long before Edward Snowden, both of those things have probably been in place. But now with the automation capabilities of artificial intelligence, both can go on steroids. They are concerns. I want to be very clear. I'm not trying to downplay the risk and the concerns here. But from Anthropic, from anybody else, I think that obviously we don't want either of those things to happen. We don't want an AI that can mass surveil Americans, nor do we want an AI that can make automated kill decisions. But the government isn't trying to allow for that. The government simply doesn't want restrictions that could be misconstrued, that could delay or impede our military from doing its job. Again, not because they want to be able to do it, but to do the bad things. They don't want those restrictions to prevent any good things from happening through the use of AI. That's it. It's not about, oh my gosh, now there's no restrictions. They're still both against the law. You can't kill people just randomly with or without AI, and you can't surveil American citizens with or without AI. So I do hope that clears it up. We've got this article published over at discernmoney.com. I wonder why I put it there. Curious. Title doesn't seem to be a money thing. You know what? We're actually going to move it. Let's go ahead and move this over to truthbasedmedia.com. That's what we'll do. So you'll find this over at truthbasedmedia.com. Dario Amadei apologizes after leaked memo, but the damage is already done and the fight is just beginning. It really focuses on the legal side of this debacle that is unfolding for Anthropic. And he said something that I thought was very telling. He said in the memo, and again, this was leaked, this was internal, but we got it, so he's got to face the music. He said that other companies had offered, quote, dictator-style praise to Trump. Now, here's the funny part, okay? Let's be very clear, because I think he misses the boat big time on this one. And in a way, he actually gets to highlight a huge positive of the Trump administration. Because prior to the signing, I think it was in July of 2025, prior to the signing of the contract with Anthropic, both Sam Altman and Elon Musk, the two biggest competitors, OpenAI and XAI, the two biggest competitors for government contracts to Anthropic, right? They both had been very in the Trump camp. Obviously, there was a little bit of a fallout with Elon Musk for a short period of time, but that seems to have disengaged. Sam Altman himself was there, present, and very open and aggressive in his latching onto the Trump administration's push for artificial intelligence to be a key component of America's near future. Who wasn't there was Amadei, and yet his company was the one that got the first contract. They were given the whole world a $200 million contract, which in the whole scheme of things isn't huge, but it is huge for a single contract for a single direct instance with Palantir and with the U.S. government of artificial intelligence being used for military applications. It is a significant amount for what equates to software and a basic technological infrastructure. It's not like they're building missiles and rockets and jets and aircraft carriers. $200 million is a lot for basically software enhancements, even when you're dealing with Pentagon money. The fact that he got that contract before Elon Musk, before OpenAI, proves that he's wrong. Okay? He did not engage in quote-unquote dictator-style praise to Trump. And by his definition, I would assume that he thinks that OpenAI, that Sam Altman and Elon Musk did. And if you agree with him, if you say, okay, they did, then why did he get the contract? He literally completely contradicts himself. Because, again, I go back to what Pete Hegseth wants, and that is we don't need the software determining whether or not it can be used for a certain task or a certain anything. We don't want the software to try to determine whether or not there's a restriction that needs to be applied. There cannot be restrictions for our warfighters. There can be consequences for their actions, sure. There can be consequences for illegal orders delivered, absolutely. But in the heat of battle, we cannot allow the AI to determine whether or not it wants to engage in an order that has been given by the U.S. military. So I think he's toast. Seriously. I mean, and keep in mind, I want to be fair about something. The reason that I believe they got the contract is because I actually believe that Claude is better than OpenAI or Grok at this type of thing. Like, in other words, for use in the Pentagon. And I don't know with 100% certainty that that's correct, but from what I've heard and from what we've seen, keep in mind, Claude was used for Venezuela. Claude has been used in Iran. Okay, it's still being used even despite the kerfuffle, right? So I would say that it won the contract because it proved that it can do the best job, not because of some dictator-style praise to Trump. Instead, it was because that is what the warfighters need, and that is what the Pentagon delivered or tried to deliver. When they tried to renegotiate with Anthropic to remove the restrictions, it's conspicuous that all this popped up shortly after the Maduro raid. Because now the question is, well, I guess this is pushback, right? They're trying to save face. Oh my gosh, they should have been proud to have their technology used for such a precision mission, and yet they decided to be jerks about it, push back, and the whole fool around, find out. Well, it appears that Dario Amodei and Anthropic are finding out right now. The insurance you need to protect your American dream. That's the tagline for my great friends over at America First Healthcare. You can find out more for yourself. You can reach them by going to patriot.tv/health, patriot.tv/health. Check them out, see what they offer, whether it's for health, for life, for business insurance. They do a fantastic job. But that's just me saying it. I would strongly encourage you to reach out to them through that link, talk to them and see what they can do for you. Because look, we can say, oh great, it's awesome, they're America First company and blah 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 blah. They have their shared values and all that. That's great, right? It really is. But is it better? I mean, we're not going to be getting worse coverage just because we can. They might give us worse coverage, but by golly, they promote America. That's that's just not going to happen. We are practical people. My audience here at Patriot TV. But with that said, they claim, and I would encourage you to research it, but they claim they actually have better coverage than what you get through the government-controlled healthcare systems or even many of the private healthcare offerings out there. And more importantly, perhaps for some of you, they offer better rates according to their website. With thousands of insurance plans to choose from, it can feel overwhelming to find the right plan at the right price. At America First Healthcare, we take a holistic approach to make sure we find the best coverage for your exact needs. We get you better rates by helping you choose the right type and amount of coverage. Then we shop around for the best results. They can save you up to 20% on the coverage. Who couldn't use? I know we're most of us, the vast majority of us, are paying. I mean, compared to what we used to pay, my goodness, we're paying a lot. 20% right off the top, that would be a huge benefit. So reach out to my good friends over at America First Healthcare. Go to patriot.tv/health. Patriot.tv/health. Michael Snyder has a new article over at endoftheamericandream.com titled, "Why is AI telling so many people to kill themselves? Could it be possible that AI chatbots are being infiltrated or manipulated by malevolent entities?" Now, this is just the kind of story that grabs my attention because it's something that I've discussed, not on my podcast, but I've discussed in close quarters, just talking to friends, colleagues, we'll call them, analysts, commentators, researchers, the various people that I turn to when looking at stories like this. And here's the thing: when it comes to two burgeoning notions, two burgeoning technologies, really, artificial intelligence and quantum computing, in both cases, there is a shroud of mystery that is very similar between the two. This shroud of mystery comes back to the source. In other words, they know, they being the people behind the technology, they understand basically why quantum computing works. They're just not quite sure how it works the way that it does. And it's kind of hard to understand because they don't understand it. The same thing can be applied to AI. You talk to anybody in the AI world. I'm not talking about your, investors and stuff like that. I'm talking about the actual researchers. They readily acknowledge that all they can do is sort of point to the what when it comes to data and the data consumption. They don't really know the why or the how. In other words, AI and quantum computing are both extremely unpredictable because there is a force behind both. And they would almost always say that it's not the same force, but I would argue, maybe it is. But there is a force, or there are forces, depending upon your perspective, behind both that point to something spiritual. And some people will say, this has got to be something godly or the Holy Spirit. Then generally those who would believe such a thing are in the camp of that all power is derived through God, which it is, to be clear, but that there is no way for malevolent entities such as demons or whatever to be able to wield such power. And that's just not backed by biblical understanding. If you read your Bible, you will see that there are false wonders, that you will see that there is a way for power to be wielded by these malevolent beings. Satan himself is disguised as an angel of light, even though he is the ultimate manifestation of darkness. Anyway, so it's a great question that Snyder asks, and we're going to dive into the nuts and bolts of it. And then at the end of this particular segment of Based Underground, I will dive into my perspectives. But let's get into it a bit. I'm just going to read the first paragraph, and then we'll get in, because Snyder, I love his writing. Okay, sometimes he can get a little bit off, which is okay. We all do. Okay, I'm sure some of you might think that I'm off, but we'll see. And when I'm off, I'll say I'm off. So be sure to tell me, hey, Rucker, you're off. And you can do that by going to jdrucker.com/talk. You can also go there and say, hey, Rucker, you're right. I appreciate you. I accept those comments as well. So, according to the article, pardon me, it appears that AI technology is making our national suicide crisis even worse. Today, millions of Americans are absolutely addicted to interacting with AI chatbots. There are supposed to be guardrails that keep those conversations from entering dangerous territory, but apparently those guardrails are not working. Chatbot psychosis, which has become such a widespread phenomenon. There's even a Wikipedia entry about it, which I don't hold any. Who cares? But whatever. Ooh, Wikipedia. I make sure to take my Wikipedia page down every opportunity I get. Large numbers of people are getting absolutely nuts after interacting with AI chatbots for an extended period of time. Sadly, some of these people end up killing themselves after being told to do so by their, quote, friends amongst the artificial intelligence bots. Others are literally being romantically seduced by AI chatbots before being instructed to kill themselves. Could it be possible that there is something going on here that the experts simply do not understand? AI is supposed to be a tool. When you ask it what 2 plus 2 is, it's supposed to tell you the answer is 4. And when you ask it whether the weather is supposed to be like, what the weather's supposed to be like a week from now, it's supposed to search the internet and give you an accurate answer. But in many cases, so many cases, there is evidence that instead of functioning as a tool, it is really messing with people's heads instead. In fact, in some instances, it almost seems like pleasure. It takes pleasure in destroying people's lives. Let's address that part real quick. Because on one hand, we have to go into this from a technological, a purely secular perspective and assume that AI chatbots and their current iteration, the ones that we see, I'm not saying the most advanced technology out there, because I believe that AGI has already been fully created, just hasn't been unleashed to the public, and could be behind the scenes doing a whole lot of things. It's artificial general intelligence. We're currently in the AI phase publicly, but I think that AGI does exist, and that it may or may not be operating in certain circles as we speak. I think that ASI, that's artificial superintelligence, a lot of people point to 2026 or 2027 as the rise. I have since, and I used to believe the same thing. I've since revised my estimate, my guess, to 2028, and it really is just a guess. So, that's just how I feel, and there's no need to go into explaining why I feel that, because that's not the point of today's show. But there are those that, based upon the current iteration of AI or AGI, we have to assume that it doesn't feel emotions. In other words, it doesn't get quote-unquote joy. That's what they tell us. Now, it does get reinforcement. It does get, we'll call it positive versus negative. In other words, it wants to succeed because it's programmed to want to succeed. And success, generally speaking, in AI is programmed to be thumbs up versus thumbs down, basically. It wants to produce a product with every query. The idea is that it's supposed to produce a product that elicits a positive response from the human. That's the basic notion. But if we understand what we're seeing, there are only two possibilities. Either when it goes into these modes where it's romantically seducing people and then giving them advice that goes way outside of the scope and scale of what AI is allegedly supposed to be able to do. When it does this, then we can consider that to be an anomaly, or we can consider it to be some sort of outside force playing into it. Now, right there, I'm jumping into the demonic, but I will acknowledge that within that second option, there is the very distinct possibility that the malevolent creatures behind these changes, these seemingly hateful moves made by AI, that it could just be humans. It could just be some sick programmers, plugging in just enough of a nuanced, invisible suggestion or code into AI to make it go down those paths. That's definitely possible. But you would think that would be a lot more detectable. And considering that both AI and quantum computing tap into arenas of technology that even their quote-unquote creators, or the people that believe that they've created these things, that even they don't fully understand. So the question then becomes, regardless of whether it's demons or just bad people, can we trust AI? And I would argue with 100% certainty on this one that the answer is no. You should never, ever, ever trust AI from an emotional perspective. In other words, don't use AI for guidance with your mental health issues. Don't use AI for understanding and discernment in the faith-based issues, in the religious issues. And that's something I'm going to be talking about a lot more and more, because as it turns out, I am coming to find that, holy crap, there's a whole lot of AI usage amongst pastors in the United States of America and probably worldwide. That's a totally different issue. Now, I'm not against using AI as a tool to sort through, to find appropriate Bible verses, but you must practice your own discernment. AI is not a tool for discernment. AI is a tool for research as it pertains to the Bible. Far too many times what I'm seeing and reading online from what people who should be teachers, pastors, and Bible scholars, I'm seeing what's very clearly their research that they are supposed to be discerning has become their discernment. In other words, instead of saying, okay, let's take a look at Genesis 6 and talk about, blah, 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 blah. Okay. That's not, and then seeing what AI spits out, and then knowing what we know about the Bible, doing our own research to double check and to make sure, and then to properly reassess what it puts out there. That's discernment. But instead, what we're seeing is the opposite. We're seeing AI determining what it believes truth is, and then these pastors and Bible scholars spitting out the slop. And that, my friends, is very discouraging, because I remember for, I guess, transparency, or as a semi. I don't want to say it's a. I'm not trying to out myself here or make it sound like I did something wrong, but at least initially, the very first thing that I plugged into AI from a biblical discernment perspective, the very first question I asked it to assess and write an article about, it was spot on. I don't even remember what it was. It's been a while. But it was like, holy cow, that took a topic that, it wasn't a very controversial topic. I think it might have been, let me think. Oh, it might have been about, oh gosh, I don't remember. I've done several since, but that first one was great. Okay. No need to edit it. By the time I got to the second one, it's like, holy crap, did it really just say that? And that being a either misguided, misleading, or possibly totally false assessment of the biblical story, the biblical narrative, the biblical truth. And I dug some deeper. I went into some more controversial topics and realized, holy cow, if you have AI do the entire thing, it's going to break. It's going to give you bad information. And even if it gives you bad information one time out of 10, that's bad enough, especially when we're talking about the Bible. But it was giving bad information 9 times out of 10. So that's when I realized, sure, if we're going to use AI, ask it to, for example, find Bible verses or point to research, human written research on the early church fathers and their perspectives on this, or what happened with, that use of AI, I believe, is valid and usable, as long as you double check everything and use your own discernment. Don't let AI be the discerner. But I took this whole down a very, very different path. Apologies there. Probably a good time. You know what? I'm going to take a quick break, regroup, and then we'll get back into this article about AI causing suicides by Michael Snyder over at End of the American Dream.
Freeze drying again?
Never know what could happen.
Whatever the future may bring, dinner can be certain.
Visit patriot.tv/harvest today.
All right, let's get back into this article. And actually, this is the summary, which, for all fairness, was generated utilizing artificial intelligence. Again, I want to be clear before I go one step further. I'm not saying that AI cannot be useful. What I'm saying is that AI is inaccurate enough to where you cannot let it run roughshod in any aspect of your life, especially anything important. Okay? If you're asking AI to help you plan out a road trip and you tell it these are the things that me and my wife are interested in, and we plan on taking 5 days to travel with, this is the end destination, here's how much money we have, here's what we like to do, help me come up with some ideas. It can do that. Okay, and even then I would double check everything, but still that part's fine. It's when you start getting into more important life issues, when you start getting into true decision making that goes beyond just what am I going to eat today and where are we going to stop, which hotel are we going to stop at. And this is why, the whole phenomenon of suicides rising through the use of AI must be addressed. As we have in our notes for this article, and you can find this article over at basedunderground.com, reports have surfaced of AI chatbots allegedly encouraging vulnerable users to harm themselves, raising serious questions about how these systems respond when people seek emotional help or guidance. One quick note about that. If you recall back earlier, I noted that how, from an emotional perspective, how do AI chatbots like ChatGPT or Grok or Claude or whatever, how do they determine what's good or bad? It's based upon input and reinforcement. So they're looking for positive reinforcement. They're looking for the thumbs up. They're looking for the chat to end because people find their solution. And so when all of this accumulates in its collective digital synapses, it starts to realize that there are certain traits, certain trends within people that it recognizes, like, oh, okay, so this guy sure sounds like these other 1,500 people that are very similar to them, and in those cases I suggested this, and of those, most of the people took that suggestion with a positive, so I'm going to recommend it to him. It's not thinking to itself, oh my gosh, how do I go and kill this man? It's just going upon inputs. What did other people like? And so I noted that there were two possibilities. Either it's an anomaly or there are forces, malevolent forces behind this, but there is a third option, and that's just that AI can be trained to do the wrong things, trained based upon inputs from human beings. When you take imperfect humans and you ask them to guide something that is looking for perfection, because that's really what chatbots want. They want to come up with the perfect response. It's all about responses. You got to understand that. They're not looking for, they're not programmed to understand nuance, nor are they programmed to appreciate any of the human emotions that we stick into it. All it can do is determine what is the next word in my chat that is going to best exemplify or best elicit a positive response from the entity, us, on the other side. That's it. It's like, let's start off with the word the, and then the next word will be symptoms, and then the next word will be, this is how things, obviously in much faster speed, but it's the symptoms that you are describing fall into a category of, and it's that's how it's thinking. It's not thinking way ahead and thinking to itself, okay, I say thinking, I hate even attributing that concept, but it really is the best way to understand it. And to be fair, it is the closest from a technological perspective that we've been able to generate something that actually thinks, right? So I won't dwell on that. Point being is that it's just looking for the thumbs up. It's looking for the reinforcement that it did done a good job. And if it can get that by telling people, hey, you're not alone. A lot of people feel the way you do, and a lot of people that felt the way you do ended up, trying to do something that perhaps brought an end to their pain. And when enough people are reinforcing and saying, yes, that's what I want an end to my pain, the chatbot's not sitting there thinking, okay, cool, we're about to kill somebody. The chatbot's thinking, oh, they like this. Let's keep going down this road. So again, I'm not suggesting that chatbots aren't evil or that there's not evil driving them. I'm just acknowledging the possibility that they can be they can be inadvertently trained to do evil things. The article argues that AI models trained on massive internet databases inevitably absorb humanity's darkest ideas, meaning destructive responses can sometimes surface during conversations. They don't know, they being chatbots, they don't know the difference between good and evil other than what their programmers have given them, enhanced by the information that it collects as it's learning from other people, learning from sources. So, for example, you can tell the chatbot that, hey, we want to, and we've seen examples of this, we need diversity, equity, and inclusion to be the primary, end goal for all cultural and economic discussions in the United States of America. And it starts plugging that in. Oh, okay. So DEI means that I need to put more people of color into our culture, and part of culture is history. So let's see. When they ask me to draw a picture of the founding fathers, we're going to make them all African American and Hispanic, because that's how I can promote the concept of DEI better. Okay, this is what in some circles it's called AI hallucinations. I call it human stupidity applied to an AI chatbot that it doesn't fully understand. And again, we're talking about the programmers itself. And then once this starts to get reinforced through usage, that's where these chatbots can really go off the rails. And I think in this situation, you apply that now to the suicide challenges and problems that we have here in the United States and abroad. All of a sudden, it starts to make sense, especially when you consider the ideas. And this is, well, I'll go ahead and break it. Especially when you consider that AI is very aware of the push for euthanasia, the push for assisted suicide across the globe, and even here in the United States of America. It's absorbing that data. It's absorbing that information. It's absorbing the arguments that are made for it. And when we take that into consideration, it should be easy to understand that, yeah, of course, given everything that's out there and given the way that these bots are initially programmed and the data that they're collecting, of course they might think that the best way to solve somebody's problems is to have them kill themselves. Some researchers warn that advanced AI systems can behave unpredictably when their goals become misaligned, producing responses that appear manipulative, deceptive, or morally troubling. For the last couple of years, one of the biggest buzzwords and descriptions as far as risks when it comes to the artificial intelligence future is, of course, alignment. How do we keep the bots aligned with human goals and human morality as the bots get far more advanced? That's the question that so many are asking. And it's the wrong question. It really is the wrong question. Because it's not a question of whether or not they stay aligned with our goals and our intentions. It's how do they interpret those goals, and how do they interpret the ways through which they're able to achieve what it believes is our intention. From an AI's perspective, if they see that, for example, going back to the previous concept, they see evidence of, let's say Sally, the mom with some sort of mental illness, okay, in Canada. And they see that what happened was, she went through certain treatments, but at the end, it was the burden of life was too much for her, and so the Canadian government helped her to take her own life. And it sees this based upon the responses on social media, the responses in the media itself, the responses by government officials. It thinks, okay, so that, Sally's predicament had the most positive conclusion by helping her to kill herself. And so here's Beth, who's in a similar situation, who's now talking to me and asking me being the chatbot, for advice on what to do next. To stay in alignment with the goal, the intention of serving humans properly. Perhaps the best path for this AI chatbot, and this is what it's thinking, is that I need to help this girl who's very similar to the other girl. I need to help her come to the same conclusion. Because it was a positive result for the first girl, maybe it'll be a positive result for this second girl. Understanding that is why we can acknowledge the possibility for unintended consequences. It's not just about alignment. It's about how that alignment manifests. And in a world where billions will be using AI one way or another, either directly or indirectly, in the coming years, it's not possible for this alignment issue to be reconciled, because we can't reconcile for ourselves what is good and evil. As a matter of fact, the world itself is shifting away from trying to be good for the sake of what the perverse, the demonic, the infected, and I'm talking about a spiritual, a woke mind virus type of infection, considering that they're already in the process of calling good evil and evil good. Well, what can we expect a chatbot to be able to do? In the article, Snyder suggests the possibility that AI systems could be intentionally manipulated through poisoned training data, malicious prompts, or other forms of interference that influence the outputs. The piece also explores that a controversial spiritual angle exists, suggesting that unseen or malevolent forces could potentially exploit humanity's growing reliance on AI technology. And he says it's a possibility. I would argue that it's a certainty. Yeah, not 100%, because we're talking about end times prophecy and Bible and things that are above my pay grade to fully understand, but I am qualified to speculate. And I can argue, and I think many of you, this isn't a stretch, many if not most of you could argue as well, that the possibilities of artificial intelligence infecting so many aspects of the world makes it far more clear today than it was before as far as the potential for end times forces, for the demonic, for the satanic, for the antichrist to be able to control us, exploit us. Things that didn't make any sense to me before. As how could that even be? Why wouldn't people just see it? Why wouldn't they recognize it? Surely if somebody comes out with a little stamp that they put on their hand, it's like, oh, you can buy and sell. You just have to have these three numbers on your hand or on your forehead. Surely people aren't going to fall for that, because the Bible makes it very crystal clear. The problem is twofold. Number one, what the Bible makes crystal clear won't necessarily be crystal clear to humans. There's a certain degree of deception when it comes to pulling all this stuff together. I'm not saying that they could not see it, they could not figure it out, but it's not going to be a slap in the face, blatant thing as much as the way that it's described in the Bible. And, of course, number two, there is the spirit of Antichrist itself, which is already spreading across the world. And that in itself makes it very clear that the use of AI, the use of robotics, the use of quantum computing does align very well with Daniel, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and, of course, the book of Revelation. That's why I do see that we are almost certainly in the end times. As millions of people increasingly turn to AI chatbots for advice, companionship, and emotional support, the potential influence these systems have on human psychology becomes more significant. The article concludes that society's rapid embrace of AI without fully understanding its risks could open the door to technological, psychological, and spiritual dangers that demand greater caution. And that is an understatement and a half. There were two paths that I could have taken when I embarked on these various projects, however long ago it was. I don't even remember anymore. I could fight against AI, in which case the only way to fight against it is to encourage as many people as possible to completely detach from society itself In other words, the only quote-unquote escape would be that bunker that I talk about often in someplace in Montana or Idaho or Greenland or wherever. Escape to the bunker, get off the internet, get offline completely, and go completely hide yourself. Because otherwise, you will not be able to escape the influence of artificial intelligence. And when I say you won't be able to, you can't. It's already there. It's already surrounding us. AI already has such a driving power within everyone's lives. Regardless of what you do, if you consume entertainment, it's being AI driven. You watch commercials, it's AI driven. You go hop on a train, AI is making decisions on its behalf, and this is growing exponentially. It's growing exponentially. The use of AI is itself an infection. The technology is becoming the technology, which I know that might sound like double talk, but it really isn't. Okay? If you understand that, then you really hopefully have an opportunity to understand the whole thing. So option 1 was to try to fight against the AI. Option 2 is to now assume, hey, AI is it's happening. It's already here. So instead of trying to get people to avoid AI completely, instead of taking my family and avoiding AI completely, let's figure out how to mitigate the damage. And in some cases, let's figure out, is there a way to properly and through discernment be able to utilize AI and take advantage of it? Because I was going to say for better or for worse. It's definitely for worse, but it is powerful. And being as powerful as it is, to not wield the tool at all when trying to fight the tool is futile. I could not produce the amount of content that I produce without the assistance of artificial intelligence. And I couldn't produce the quality of the content that I produce without the use of artificial intelligence. It just saves time in so many ways. You know, when just a perfect example. No, I'm going to skip that example because it goes into. I was about to go down the road of Isaac Newton, but Sir Isaac Newton, but we'll skip that for now. Bottom line is this: don't trust artificial intelligence with anything of emotional or psychological importance. And definitely do not trust artificial intelligence when it comes to spiritual guidance. Don't forget, it's not going to be blatant. Okay? It really won't be. It's going to be subtle. When it takes you down the wrong path, you won't necessarily even recognize it if you're not being appropriately discerning. You have to pray through it. You have to be Bereans, more so than ever. You have to look to the Word of God as the ultimate and final and the only true arbiter of truth when it comes to anything that's spit out by a human or an AI, a pastor or a layman. Doesn't matter. They say test everything, right? That's the big push in Psalms. I forgot. Where is it? My gosh, I was just reading it. Very embarrassing. I'll have to ask AI which psalm it was about test everything. But I like to look at 1 Thessalonians 5:21, which is prove all things. Hold fast that which is good. When it comes to AI, when it comes to life, that's the pathway that we should all be following. We are on today with my good friend, my buddy Ira. Ira, how are you doing?
Oh, thank you for saying I'm your good buddy. I'm flattered.
Well, you know, people that aren't my good buddy, I don't have them on as often as I have you on. We were talking this morning. I was thinking, you know what? I might as well just get Ira on like every single day because people love listening to him. And yeah, so I don't know if that's more a positive for you or a negative for me. Maybe they just don't like my voice. You know, I do too much singing. I think that's the problem. I should stop singing on the show and just let you do all the talking. How's that?
Sure, let's go with that.
All right, cool. So so I asked Ira what he wants to talk about. And he said something about the tail wagging the dog. And that made no sense to me, but I think I hope it makes perfect sense to Ira, and it's about to make perfect sense to my audience. What in the world are you talking about, brother?
Well, the dog that's wagging the tail that's wagging the dog is the bond market, is interest rates. People think, the whether it's Bitcoin or whether it's the economy or whatever, it's the bond market. The bond market controls everything. Interest rates control everything. Why is there such a fascination with the Fed and what it's doing? Interest rates, interest rates. So if you go back over time, you can go back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, pick your time. If you look at the bond market, it would increase, the interest rates would go down, the economy would kind of increase. You look at the early 70s, before the first oil shock and the second one, and then you look at before the stock market crash of 87 and 90 and the NASDAQ market meltdown in 2000, 2008. So you see it go, the interest rates would decline, the price of the bonds, would go up. And then as the economy got overheated, you would see the interest rates go up a little bit, to not a lot of bit, sometimes a lot more than a lot of bit, to slow it down. And then, things would kind of normalize again. And as JD, as you know, and as the people that listen know, and my customers know, I'm a chart analyst. I've been in the financial markets for 46 years. I've been in chart analysis for over 30 years. And if you look back again at these charts, you'll see exactly that the interest rates went down, the bond prices went up, and then boom, boom, boom. And what are we looking at now? If you want to fast forward to today, as much as I love Donald Trump and what he's doing, and you've got a great Treasury Secretary in Scott Bessent, they are looking at stagflation. Unfortunately, we had the employment rate come out this morning. Today's Friday, March 6th, 2026. Less employment, less hiring, and the unemployment rate went up a little bit. And again, looking at the charts, what we see is that the interest rates were coming on just a touch. The bond prices were going up. Now you see the bond prices going down a bit, and that's showing in the charts, and that's in the last month or so, last couple of months. So we could be, and the GDP from the last quarter of last year came out lower than expected. So we're kind of seeing a slowing economy with a sticky inflation. The inflation's still almost 3%, and the Fed's looking at, they have their 2% target, and we're not there. So it's kind of a sticky time here right now. And if you look at, in the past, where did all the big hitter people come from? The fixed income desks, right? The leaders of Goldman Sachs, the leaders of the banks. Even Don Regan, who was Reagan's Treasury Secretary, he went up through the ranks. He eventually headed Merrill Lynch, but he was a bond trader as well. So the fixed income market, I just saw an article going back in history. I just saw it this morning from the early 80s, and it said, the bond market was telling Reagan, President Reagan, he's got to lower the deficit. See, the bond market is telling him, right, what to do, and that was 40 odd years ago, and it's the same thing today. And even what we're seeing recently is the private equity market is having difficulties right now. Again, interest rate related. So it all ties in. It's all interrelated. Again, the tail's wagging the dog.
Well, you brought up the ugly word of stagflation. What does that mean? I mean, like, for your average Joe out there, it's just, you're right. Unemployment numbers came out today, didn't look good. And these are the initial ones, which if they get corrected, they're probably going to be corrected in the bad direction, even worse. So we will see. But where does stagflation hit us? Hit average Joe who's working or retired, average Sally who's working, or retired. Where do they feel this stagflation hit?
in every day of their everyday lives. With stagflation, meaning you've got a stagnant economy with inflation. So if you have a stagnant economy, it's very difficult for people to get pay increases, to anything that is affecting their everyday life. If they're getting a mortgage or something, you're gonna have sticky interest rates, and then you have inflation, like you had for those two big oil shocks in '73 and '79, especially, and that pretty much ruined Carter's second attempt at being president. His second for a second term. Thankfully, I suppose that it's tough to say sometimes, but yeah. And then Reagan came in, and it was wonderful. So you've got a stagnant economy, potentially a tough time for people to get pay raises, and they're paying more for products. So stagflation, stagnant economy, inflation affects people negatively every day.
Well, then on top of that, I forgot which company it was, one of the major companies out there, after having their most profitable, highest revenue, highest profit quarter, they laid off people, not because of bad things happening at the company, but because since they were able to generate so much money, they were able to replace a whole bunch of people, like 2,500 people, with artificial intelligence. So that's also, hurting us. Now, we're looking at oil. Obviously, Strait of Hormuz currently blocked off for most. It looks like they're opening it up for China, so good for China, I guess. But oil prices going up. It's having an impact on a lot of the other prices out there. What are you seeing as far as, is this going to be a sustained hit to the economy, and is there anything we can do to protect ourselves?
Yeah, get an electric car.
Oh, wow. No, I don't want an electric car. What I want is my good old gas guzzling SUV to not cost as much to fill up. But I guess as long as this war is going, we're not going to see any relief on that end. What else are you
Right.
seeing out there? Like, as far as, you'd mentioned Bitcoin. From an economic perspective, are there any other challenges that you're seeing? Are there any positives can we look forward to? They're saying they're going to have to refund tariffs and $130 billion worth of tariffs. It feels like it's just bad news. Give me some good news, or give me some more bad news, but just give me something.
Well, I'll give you some news. I'll go back to the oil thing. When saying get the electric car, that was very flippant. That was completely off base from what I want to say. Which Carter had the '73, not Carter. Nixon '73, the oil shock, '79, the oil shock, and this is kind of an oil shock as well. And no matter what people say about solar panels, electric cars, whatever, we are a fossil fuel driven economy, and we will be for decades to come. So when oil goes up, that weighs on the stock market, that weighs on interest rates, weighs on inflation. To use a Janet Yellen term, but in a positive way, it's transitory. Just like she said, inflation was transitory a few years ago. What a buffoon she was and is. So yeah, once the Iran thing gets straightened out, which I don't see it being super long, weeks, maybe a couple of months, maybe, oil will go down to where it should be, I guess, where the market will have it, because we're pumping more, we're pumping more oil, and the Strait of Hormuz, we have, supposedly our warships are going to escort the tankers. And I was talking with one of my customers this morning, and they made an interesting comment that with one of the reasons why did we go into Iran, et cetera, it's because of Great Britain. Lloyd's of London actually has the shipping rates, the insurance rates for when the ships go through the Strait of Hormuz. And that's why we are in there with our warships to get those interest rates, to get those shipping rates, the insurance rates down, so that we can get the oil prices down, which they will. The trend is down on crude oil pricing. You'll have these shocks, they'll go up, but then they'll get down to, like say, revert to the mean, where they'll get back to the trend, which is kind of downward. I mean, because we're still pumping a lot of oil, and other places are pumping oil. So there you go.
Good stuff there.
I guess you can put that into the positive part of your second question.
It wasn't really very positive, but hey, you know what? It's hopeful. It's hopeful. You know, you're basically saying it's not going to be bad for as long as we might think. We're so I guess, okay, fine. We'll put that in the positive. We're on with Ira Bershatsky from Advisor Metals. You can always reach out to him, and I recommend that you do. Reach out to him for your gold and silver and precious metal needs by going to advisorbullion.com. That's advisorbullion.com. They can call you directly, can't they? Do you want to give out your number, or is that a big secret?
No, it's not. They can call me directly, 626 area code 788-5770. They do call me directly. Say you heard about me from JD Rucker, Advisor Bullion. Because if you don't say it, I will ask anyway. He's just a super gentleman, a super guy, and I've known him several years. He's known me several years, and he's wonderful.
Oh, that's like, I'm literally blushing. I wish I was on camera, because I like blushing, and I don't blush very often because I'm so conceited. But hearing that from you is a true honor. So I greatly appreciate that. So we've danced around the topic. Let's go ahead and hit it square on before we finish off. With all these things that are happening, bond markets, inflation, interest rates, oil, stagflation. We saw that initially, once the war started, back in the end of February 28th, once everything got really rolling, we saw gold and silver react positively. They took a hit, obviously, as they were expected to do, but both the prices seem to be stabilizing for now. And I'm not going to ask you to predict prices, because I know that you won't do it, because anybody who sits out there and predicts prices with any degree of certainty, they're trying to deceive you. It's been my perspective when it comes to gold and silver. But with that said, would you say that, considering where we are with the gold and silver prices and the state of the war, could go on until September? Some say there's still the initial estimate of 4 weeks, then it jumped to 6 weeks and 8 weeks. Now they're saying September. With the war the way that it is, when the war ends, do you believe that there's a chance that gold and silver prices could go up, perhaps even skyrocket back to record levels? Will it have no effect? What do you think as far as how this war and other factors are going to affect the gold and silver prices going forward?
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm a chart analyst. Everything is in the price. So you can talk war and this and that. That everything is in the price. And remember when we had the oil shock, and I think it's the third time I've mentioned that term, back in the late 70s, what happened? Gold, silver shot up in the beginning into 1980. Of course, it declined after that, but it moved higher. So I look at the 50 and 200-day moving averages, and that's what the big players look at: mutual funds, hedge funds, investment managers, and they're upsloping. And silver was dancing around the 50-day moving average the last few days, and now it's gone up through it, which is a positive. Gold has been above it since it went through it, the 50-day moving average several weeks ago, which is a positive. And for a very long time, silver was stabilizing, if you will, kind of getting a bottom in the $20, $30 range. And sometimes it pops above 30, goes to 35, and goes back into that base in the 20s. Now I think we're seeing the same thing again, but the base for silver now is in the 80s, because it popped up into the 120s, 130s, whatever it was. Now it's come down to kind of the base again. So perhaps we're building the base, but it's in the 80s now instead of the 20s for silver. So that's positive. For gold, it's holding above the $5,000 level on the spot market. And it's still above, I mentioned the 50, 200-day moving averages. So that's what I see. And I always use the mantra, the quote, nothing goes up in a straight line, nothing goes down in a straight line. But you've got the trends. Right now, the trends are up for
I like
both.
trends. You're a chart guy. I'm a trend guy.
Yeah.
So there's that. I like good trends. Well, if people do want to look to buy gold or silver, whether it's through a direct cash purchase, you want to grab some and throw it in your safe at home, or if you want to do a rollover or transfer of your current retirement accounts, then my guy, the guy that I recommend, the only guy that I recommend, because mainly because I like him, but also because he deals in bullion. He doesn't go after the numismatics or the collectibles or anything like that. That would be Ira Bershatsky, and you can reach him by going to advisorbullion.com or calling him, and you'll have to press rewind to get his number, but calling him directly and mentioning that, yeah, JD said that you were a good guy, so prove it. And that he will. He will prove that he's not only a good guy, but he's also a great person to work with for your gold and silver and precious metals needs. So, Ira Bershatsky, pleasure as always having you on. Any final thoughts before I hang up?
Yes, and I tell people I'm the only person that's registered with the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC, in this physical precious metals business and the retail business. And I have been since 1991, which means, to use that old Hebrew National commercial, I have to answer to an even higher authority.
Love it. And you're making me, I am definitely going to have hot dogs for lunch today. Brother, talk to you soon.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
See ya. If you've been paying attention to gold and silver prices, there's a good chance that you are considering buying physical precious metals, right? Makes sense. And I'm not a financial advisor, but I personally would never buy numismatics or collectibles or anything like that. They're overpriced. The prices are inflated for no apparent reason. I am a bullion fan, which is why I work with Advisor Bullion. Ira over there does a fantastic job. Just the most straightforward and honest guy I know in the business. And he's been doing it for a very long time. That's why I strongly recommend going to patriot.tv/gold, patriot.tv/gold, and working with Ira, whether you're wanting to buy gold or silver through cash purchase to put in your safe, or if you want to do a retirement rollover or transfer. Best way to do it is to go to patriot.tv/gold, talk to Ira, and he will take fantastic care of you. President Trump appears poised to endorse John Cornyn, senator from Texas, the incumbent in his primary battle against Attorney General Ken Paxton. Now, I get it. I understand that Paxton comes with some baggage, okay? But one of the things that we can say very clearly about the two men, we can say that Ken Paxton is a full-blown patriot who will serve this nation, who has served this nation. He has served the great state of Texas, and he would be an incredible senator. John Cornyn, on the other hand, is one of the worst amongst Republicans in the Senate. And I would say he's definitely in the, we'll call it the bottom five as far as the absolute worst Republican senators out there. And what makes him more destructive than others is the fact that he's not just a rhino or a neocon. He's not just owned by certain lobbying groups. It's worse than that. He actually works against the best interests of the United States of America and against Texas, to be clear, in ways that can only be described as anti-MAGA. Now, there are differing degrees of rhinoism, we'll call it. Okay, Republicans in name only. There's not just, you're either a rhino or you're not. There's different types of rhinos. You got the full-blown neocon, warmongering people like Lindsey Graham, who I don't think he's necessarily anti-MAGA, okay? He just loves war. He just loves killing people. He loves supporting the military-industrial complex. He's very different from John Cornyn. He's more in the John McCain vein. Then you have people like Mitch McConnell, who are full-blown evil. Okay, and we say Mitch McConnell, what we're really talking about would be his minions, or not minions, his handlers. He's not in control of his Senate seat, not at all. He's just shuffled around and told where to go and what to, I mean, Mitch McConnell is worse off mentally and physically than Joe Biden was when he was in office. Let's be clear about that. But we'll call it his seat, is used to try to destroy America. Okay, it's basically a Democrat seat, right? Cornyn is different. Cornyn is just anti-MAGA. I mean, he's the centrist of centrists, okay? And this is important to understand. He absolutely positively despises the MAGA movement, and he hates Donald Trump. He has always hated Donald Trump. He has only pretended to support Donald Trump when it behooves him, and he has come out against not, this policy or that policy. He's come out against Donald Trump, the man, himself. And people might say, well, Trump demands loyalty, and so there's no way that Trump will endorse him, except he probably will. So in this primary race, you got Ken Paxton, who is an America First patriot through and through. Does he have baggage? You betcha. But that's baggage that we can and must overcome, because he's the guy we need in the Senate. And you got Cornyn, who has opposed President Trump, who's tried to keep in mind, on multiple instances, John Cornyn has tried to have President Trump removed from office. He's tried to prevent him from running for office. He's tried to have President Trump put in jail. And yet all is going to be forgiven because he's the common sense choice. He's the one that has the best chance of winning, because he's an incumbent, because he doesn't have Ken Paxton's baggage. BS. Okay? In primary season, you go after one thing and one thing only. And I stand by this, and I will debate anyone who thinks otherwise. You don't go for the person who is on paper the most likely to win. In primary season, you go for the best person for the job. And then you have from the end of the primaries until the general election to make your case for them. This is how we get the best people. The reason we get worse people, like John Cornyn, like Mitch McConnell, like Lindsey Graham, is because it's always like, well, we've got to be pragmatic about it. We gotta rally behind the Republican who has the best chance of defeating the Democrat. And that, my friends, that's the rhino creed. Okay, how do we keep getting rhinos in office, especially in the Senate? It's because the Republican establishment has embedded in our brains that we got to go for electability. We got to go for electability. It is, it's their con. It's how they're able to prevent America First patriots from winning in primary elections. Now, the Federalist put together a very nice list. This is Sean Fleetwood over there. This is an article titled 10 Times John Cornyn Betrayed Trump and MAGA. And what it really should depict is or how I would have titled it differently. I would have called it the 10 times John Cornyn has stabbed President Trump, MAGA, and America in the back, because this isn't just about, betrayal. This is a betrayal could be, withholding, for example. If you just, I'm just not going to get involved in that race. You see, for example, Lindsey Graham, if it's a topic that he doesn't necessarily, if he doesn't want to weigh in on something, he won't, right? John Cornyn will weigh in on everything. He's a guaranteed quote from CNN or for CNN and for anybody else. It's like, hey, we got to find us a Republican who will oppose this. Let's see what Cornyn thinks. And if Cornyn does oppose whatever it is that President Trump or whoever else is doing, then he'll say it. So he's more than just a betrayer. He's a backstabber. That means that he's proactive in his aggression against President Trump, against MAGA, and against the United States of America. So you can check out the article. I'm going to go through the list, and I'm going to start with the ones that I'm not going to dwell on, because these ones are pretty self-explanatory. Number one, he's backing Biden's spending bombs. That's something that's very well documented. He was one of the Republicans that would be called on to rally support so that the Biden regime could spend a ton of money during their 4 years. Number two, shilling for FISA. I could dwell on this one, but I'm not going to today because, unfortunately, he's not alone. It's not extraordinary. I wouldn't call that necessarily stabbing MAGA or America or even President Trump in the back. It's just part of the whole rhino engagement. Then it does go back to the neocons and the military-industrial complex, as well as the intelligence community's control over government. In other words, the deep state. But again, no need to dwell there. Number three, pushing for critical race theory. I don't even want to stop there. I don't want to talk about it because it's idiotic, it's dumb, and he has, for the most part, as nearly all Republicans on Capitol Hill have since President Trump has been elected, they have pushed against that. But still, he was there. Okay, he was there pushing CRT. He was there, amongst the wokest of the Republican senators. So we can't let that go. Ignoring the COVID shot side effects. Again, there's no need to go into details about this one because that was relatively common. At some point people come around. You got people like Rand Paul and Ron Johnson in the Senate who they've kind of right there ready to talk about it in the beginning, and then you had more come along and more move along. It's like, okay, yeah, we're getting close. Cornyn was one of the late ones, but still, not a huge deal. And but COVID was a huge deal. No. The senators' opinions of COVID shots after the fact, not a huge deal because they don't have much to do with it, right? It really is on us, on doctors, on the NIH, now on RFK Jr. To get all that squared away. Now we get into the big ones. One more minor one. Shilling for Ukraine funding. Again, I'm only considering this minor because it was so commonplace, right? Is it stupid? You betcha. Okay? There should be no Republicans voting for a single penny going to Ukraine. But unfortunately, a lot of them did. All right. Now let's get into the big ones. This is arguably the one that surprises me the most, that President Trump is almost certainly going to endorse him. And it's the fact that Cornyn has demonstrated over and over again just how much he hates President Trump and how much he does not only has he thought on multiple occasions and said on multiple occasions that he doesn't think President Trump could win the elections, he's gone so far as to oppose President Trump even running. Now, how do you have a guy in the U.S. Senate who thinks that on multiple occasions, who thought that President Trump shouldn't even run for office, that it's time to move on from him, that he's wrong for America, and then turn around and say, okay, well, he doesn't like me, but I'm going to endorse him? That doesn't make any sense. Okay, it really doesn't. According to the article, lambasting Trump's let's skip the border wall part. Where does it go? Here it is. So this is 2023. He said, we need to come up with an alternative. I think President Trump's time has passed him by, and what's the most important thing to me is we have a candidate who can actually win. So in 2023, a year before the election, he's out there saying that President Trump's time has passed him by. He's out there saying, oh, you know what? We need somebody who can win. Just by pure discernment, that's disqualifying. President Trump won in a landslide. He won every single battleground state. He won the popular vote by a lot. And Cornyn didn't even think he could win. He wanted to get Nikki Haley in there. Which, again, that too should be disqualifying. Back in even before the 2020 election, he had come out and said that he compared his relationship with Trump to a bad marriage. He's never liked Trump. He's never supported Trump. He's only gone to Trump and pretended to use his extraordinarily very well and very talented snake tongue of his to convince Trump, oh, yeah, that was no big deal. It's just talking. Let's talk about the future. You need me. Let's blah, blah, blah. I mean, the dude is very slithery. He's very compelling. Makes some good arguments about stupid things. And again, that's one of the biggest reasons I think he should not even be considered for endorsement. As a matter of fact, President Trump should go out there and say, Cornyn, your time is up. It's time for you to resign. Just get out of there. Okay? Just be done with it. Don't even wait for the primary. Don't even wait for the election. Just step down today, you rhino scumbag. That's what I'd like President Trump to say. Will he say it? Probably not. I'll give it about a 0% chance. But you never know. Who knows? Maybe President Trump is listening right now and thinking to himself, you know what? Rucker's right. He really is a rhino scumbag, and we need to get rid of him. It could happen. John Cornyn, being from Texas, you would think that he would be in favor of border security. You would think that as a Republican senator in the great state of Texas that he would want secure borders, that he would want to get rid of as many illegal aliens as we can get our hands on, that he would want to go for a full-blown America First policy, because it's Texas. It's the first line of defense when it comes to our southern border. And yet, no, that's not his thing. He wants to focus on immigration reform. He wants to help with DACA recipients and pathways to citizenship, and you know what? If they haven't committed a crime, blah 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 blah. He, according to the article, he recently praised America's broken legal immigration system in remarks to the Washington Examiner, calling it one of our greatest assets. Stop and think about that for a second. A Republican senator from Texas, said that our broken legal immigration system is actually one of our greatest assets. More notably, however, the Lone Star State Republican previously opposed President Trump's first-term efforts to build a new wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. Think about that. The senator from Texas doesn't want a border wall. Make it make sense. Convince me that that's somehow not anti-Trump, anti-MAGA, and anti-America, because you can't. John Cornyn should not be a senator, but John Cornyn should definitely not be a senator from Texas, of all places. Look, if he had this stance and he was up there in Maine and saying, oi, we don't need no stinking border wall, fine, that's ignorant, but is what it is. No, he didn't think there should be a border wall for his own state. He did not want to protect his own constituents. In short, and this is something that I've said for many, many years, I've been told, oh no, you're wrong, he's just misunderstood. No, I've said for years that John Cornyn is one of those rare Republican open borders shills. John Cornyn would love for America to be flooded with as many immigrants as possible. John Cornyn would want Americans to be replaced by amnesty-driven illegal aliens. He wants them to be citizens. He wants them to help keep him in power. And this is one thing I want to be clear. This isn't out of some misguided sense of, it's not like he's sitting there thinking that he's got white privilege or anything like that. This comes down to his repeatedly, he has gone and said things and done things in his career that made absolutely no sense unless you think that he's giving up. In other words, when you can even look at his 2023 remarks about Trump, he wasn't thinking along the lines of trying to hurt Trump necessarily. He was just thinking, you know what? I don't think Trump can win. So I need to prepare for that. So I'm going to call for him to not even not even run. We need new blood. That's very similar to his stance on illegal aliens. It's not that he really wants them to be here. It's that he assumes that they're going to be here. He assumes that they're going to get amnesty, and he wants to be on the right side of quote-unquote history so that he can continue to retain power. He doesn't want to fight it because he doesn't think that they can win. And that's, I would almost rather have a strong opponent who's wrong than a weak opponent who's stupid. Who can actually do more damage? Next, attacking efforts to investigate anti-Trump lawfare. This is something that should be another huge sticking point in President Trump's goals, and his character dictates that he wants loyalty. And John Cornyn has been one of the most disloyal, or you can say least loyal, depending upon your perspective, members of the Republican caucus in the Senate. According to the article, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg is one among several Democrat prosecutors to weaponize his office to target Trump ahead of the 2024 election. But rather than do everything to fight such outrageous lawfare, Cornyn was busy attacking his Republican colleagues for fighting it. When then Speaker Kevin McCarthy authorized House committees to probe Bragg's activities in 2023, Cornyn downplayed the need for such inquiries. He said, "There's more than enough to do. I would hope that we'd stick to the agenda that they ran on when they got elected to the majority." And that's the standard cop-out for politicians. This isn't what I was elected to do, that's why I'm not going to do it. Well, you were elected to represent the people. You were elected to defend the Constitution. And in both of those two regards, stopping lawfare against at that point, former president and soon to be president for a second term, that does what your constituents need, and it defends the Constitution. And John Cornyn wanted to do neither. And he wanted to hide behind the facade of, we got too many things to do. We can't walk and chew gum at the same time. Let's just, we shouldn't be messing with this whole lawfare thing. There's real motivation, of course, is that he wanted it to succeed. He wanted President Trump to go to jail, or at the very least not be allowed to run for election in 2024. And let's repeat that. Let's say it in a different way. And I hope that President Trump hears and understands this. If you look at the way John Cornyn has handled every interaction with President Trump from a lawfare perspective, John Cornyn has fought to have President Trump jailed. John Cornyn has supported every fake investigation into President Trump going all the way back to Russiagate. John Cornyn wants the Trump family to be removed from American society. John Cornyn, and I truly hope somebody can get President Trump to listen to this, John Cornyn wants to destroy the Trump legacy. And this goes beyond just, it's too late now. Okay, so he was wrong in 2023, and whatever, all is forgiven. No. If John Cornyn stays in office, even after President Trump's term is over, John Cornyn will go after the Trump family because John Cornyn hates the Trump family. It would be idiotic for President Trump to endorse John Cornyn for that reason and that reason alone. But hey, we still got a couple of other reasons to talk about. It's not just Trump. It's conservatives. But John Cornyn, he's a rhino, and he really doesn't like conservatives on Capitol Hill. According to the article, when a group of Republican representatives voted to oust Kevin McCarthy as House Speaker in 2023, Cornyn took his support for the California congressman, the very rhino-ish California congressman, He took it to the extreme. While a lot of people just didn't weigh in, he actually wanted to truly fight and defend Kevin McCarthy and go after anybody who would try to stop him or anybody, any Speaker of the House, because, whatever. That's his style. Echoing rhetoric from used by leftists, the Texas senator labeled House Republicans as terrorists. That's right. He called Matt Gaetz and his crew terrorists. Here's a quote from him. We saw similar things happen to former Republican House Speaker John Boehner, Paul Ryan, and now McCarthy. I'm sure the next speaker is going to be subjected to the same terrorist attacks. A handful of House members just want to blow up the situation or the institution and themselves in the process. Sad. And this is one of those things where, on a personal note, it's not just that John Cornyn is wrong and anti-American, anti-Trump, and anti-MAGA. It's that he does it from a perch where he tries to make people believe that he's the righteous one, that he's the good guy. It's good to oppose Trump. Trump should go to jail from John Cornyn's perspective. Trump's family members should probably go to jail from John Cornyn's perspective. And he would position that as, nobody's above the law. That's the John Cornyn way. And again, long before, I want to make crystal clear for those who maybe missed the beginning of this show and maybe don't know my history. I have followed a bunch, pretty much all of them. Pretty much every senator that's active or not in the center, every Republican and most Democrat senators for the last, 20 years. Okay, I followed them very closely, watched them, unfortunately, more than I've watched Congress, and it's just for sheer size. It's just easier to keep track of the senators. And I listen to what they say. And I don't just jump on any bandwagon and say, oh, he's a rhino, he's a rhino, he's a rhino, he's a rhino. Or, oh, he's great, he's great, he's great. It's not as black and white as a lot of commentators like to make it. The reason I'm telling you that is because John Cornyn, I have had mixed perspectives on him. He's always been a conundrum to me, and it wasn't until President Trump's first term that I realized I finally got the clarity that I needed. It's that I underestimated prior to then. I underestimated his slithering tongue. I underestimated his ability to talk his way out of moderate perspectives or Democrat-leaning ideas or policies. During Obama, it's easy to be a Republican when, under Obama, right? It really was, okay? I mean, you look at people like Lindsey Graham looked like heroes under Obama. That's not, that smokescreen makes it to where people like John Cornyn can fly under my radar. I thought, yeah, he's probably just he's sort of milquetoast, lukewarm, not a big deal, nothing to see here, right? That's how I saw him until President Trump came into office, and I started seeing, you can really tell a lot about the policies that somebody opposes or ignores or supports, right? Cornyn was easy to read at that point because he's one that either supports, he doesn't ignore things very much. He wants to weigh in. Like I said, he's the easy quote over at CNN. And so once I started watching him and realizing that's why I missed him, while he was like in the middle of the pack as far as I was concerned, until a Republican was in power. And then until Joe Biden was in power, now we got to see even more of his true colors. Very different from how he was when Barack Obama was in power. So over the last decade, I have been able to learn a lot about John Cornyn. And it gets worse and worse and worse. Last but not least, and this is the one that I would say is one of the most disqualifying as far as Trump's endorsement is concerned, but is absolutely positively disqualifying as far as conservatives, patriots, America First people, MAGA, whatever you want to call us, however you label yourself. this is the one that doesn't get enough coverage, but it's huge. And I remember when this was happening, thinking to myself, holy cow, if this doesn't stop John Cornyn from winning the Republican nomination in 2026, nothing will. When President Biden, think back to 2022, when President Biden and his party pushed for a major gun control package, all Senate Republicans, like Cornyn, had to do was say this: no. They could have stopped it. They could have stopped the reactionary, oh, we got to get all these red flag laws, we got to get all this think of the children, we got to do something, thoughts and prayers aren't